I just remember. Yeah.
Would you bring Xavier also brought? Zoom over.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Plus lemon and
Are you going home tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Citrus.
Okay, I have the pleasure to introduce Melinda Morgan to our lecture today. Melinda is part of the University of New Mexico Sustainability Studies program as a director. The program envisions to cultivate a learning community that transforms paradigms and creates pathways to equitable and sustainable world. She is also a Research Professor in Geography and Environmental Studies at the University of New Mexico. Melinda got her BA in Political Science at the University of Oregon, her MS in Counseling from the University of Wyoming, and her JD from the University of Idaho. Melinda has worked at several establishments such as the Idaho Conservation League as a state affairs director, United States Coastal Field and Life Circle as an author, Advocates for the West as a staff attorney, Lewis and Clark Law School as a Natural Resource Law Institute Fellow, and the University of Wyoming Hobbs School as first as a research scientist to a Wyoming Excellence Chair to a professor to the Dean of the Hobbs School from 2017 to 2019. Melinda has reviewed several books and journals throughout her career. A couple of reviews she has done are in the Higher Education Policy, Ecology and Society, Society of Natural Resources, Geography Research. Additionally, Melinda has written a book with a University of Utah law professor, Rodney Craig, called The End of Sustainability, Resilience, and the Future of Environmental Governments in the Anthropocene. Melinda has received funding from organizations such as UNM Advanced Women in STEM Faculty Development Award, National Science Foundation, Sustainable Regional Systems, NSFF Score, the U.S. Department of Energy, and others. Her research centers on emerging environmental government structures, examining how these new frameworks address environmental issues while integrating with existing legal and regulatory systems. Currently, she is a lead project investigator for the Intermountain West Transformation Network that represents partnership with 8 Western U.S. Universities of over 80 partnership organizations. So please give a round of applause for Melinda Morgan.
That is the most detailed and lovely introduction I've received in some time. I so appreciate that. It is so great to be back at the Hobbs School. I have my hobby outfit on today. You can see I proudly have my vest on. I've had so much fun today, just chatting with folks and sort of, making new connections and meeting new people, meeting some of the graduate students through the graduate program flourishing so much has been just so wonderful to see, and of course seeing old friends and catching up with people. So it's really fun for me to return and check in, and I'm going to grab my my phone here so I can kind of keep track of time a little bit and share with you a little bit about what I've been up to, and share in particular some work that I'm doing with a large interdisciplinary team that it was just mentioned. We're calling the Transformation Network. So I want to talk with you a little bit about the work that we're doing in the TN. This is a part of a road trip I'm doing. So I'm going to be giving 6 talks, some versions of this talk in 5 states over the next 2 weeks. And I'm going to be talking with a lot of folks about the nature of this type of work. I feel like many of us are doing just more and more work in large interdisciplinary teams. So Corey and I were just talking about the, I think it's called the Y-ACT team, this wonderful NSF F-score team. Even if the ad's big or bigger than the team I'm going to be sharing with you, $20 million over 5 years to do Wyoming climate adaptation work in 3 different watersheds. So exciting. And so I think how we do this work and how we can do it effectively, learning from each other, is so important. So today I want to share with you sort of a little bit about the Transformation Network, what we're about, why we're doing what we're doing, and then also our research design. And in particular, I want to share with you our theoretical framework, which is something we call guided transformation. And after I get into our theoretical framework, I'm going to provide an example. We're going to walk through the framework, sharing with you the challenge facing my current home watershed, the Rio Grande watershed, and the transformation that we're facing as a result of climate change. We're crossing an ecological threshold right now as a result of climate change. Our forests are changing. We're moving into a new type of regime, and our water supply is under threat as a result of that. So how are we dealing with it? How can we help our communities face that challenge? And all of this, and then hopefully we're going to get into maybe your own examples. I heard that almost a bunch of you are going to actually be doing your own presentations later today. You're going to be doing your own RFPs. So I know many of you are thinking about community challenges right now. So could you use this guided transformations framework in your own thinking? So we want to all be thinking about transformations and maybe could you employ this framework? We want to start using these ideas out in the world. I'm curious to hear your own thoughts about its efficacy. This actual concept is one that we're actually going to be publishing as a part of a special issue on convergent science and sustainable regional systems in ecology and society. And so if you're interested in learning more about it, you can find it there hopefully in the next couple of months. That's where we're headed. So a little bit about the TN. We started as a result of an NSF workshop in 2019. And at that workshop, Deb Holland, who was then a member of the New Mexico congressional delegation, gave the keynote address. She now is, of course, the current Secretary of Interior, the first Native American Secretary of Interior. And this is what she said. Well, hi, Ginger. I see you on Zoom. Hey, Ginger. And hello to everybody who's on Zoom right now. She said, overcoming the existential crises of climate change, a growing urban-rural divide, and growing economic inequalities demands action from all of us. We need new partnerships, inclusive approaches, and agents of change who will fight together for a sustainable future for urban and rural communities and landscapes. We really took that as our sort of marching orders. And we knew if an opportunity really came for us to write a larger proposal, we were going to take that opportunity and we were going to seize upon it. I was actually dean of the law school at the time that this workshop was taking place. I came down to New Mexico to be a part of the workshop. I gave a little talk because I do work in resilience theory. They asked me to do a little kind of resilience 101. Did anyone remember Marie Kondo back when she was in? So that was really hot at the time. So I gave a little talk called Resilience Habits, because I was usually into habits. So it's like, does resilience give you joy? I was kind of trying to do it. And I heard, I don't know if this is actually true, but I heard that Marie Kondo since had children and the whole thing is going out the window. True enough, but anyway, it was really fun. So that's when I bought into this whole idea of working with the TN, and we sat down after the workshop. We're like, okay, we think an opportunity for writing a large NSF proposal is going to be happening. And when it happens, we're going to do it. We did it. We wrote the proposal. We got funded for what's called a Sustainable Regional Systems Network. So we are now funded. We're near 3 of our grant. University of New Mexico is what we call the mothership for the proposal, but there are 8 institutions, all R1 institutions involved in the TN. And I'm going to be visiting 3 of them on my tour as what I'm calling the Northern Sweep in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to be also at Utah State later this week, and then up to Washington State University later. I'll be visiting Boise State University and University of Idaho also as part of my tour. I was just at Colorado State University. Our goal, as you can see here, as stated, is really to be working with communities to build capacity for adaptations and what we're calling guided transformations. What does that mean? We'll be unpacking that in a second. For sustainable solutions for regional systems with innovative and equitable solutions. So this means that we're going to be taking on challenges ranging from climate change and wildfire to food deserts and social injustice. So we're working on a wide variety of challenges, but all related to this idea of ways in which we're facing tipping points in these systems, ways in which these communities are facing system dynamic challenges that have them facing regime changes. this is what our network looks like right now. As I just mentioned, we've got 8 universities. Of those 8 universities, 5 of them are what we call Hispanic serving institutions, and also are Native American serving institutions. So they're majority minority institutions. And this gives you sort of this wheel shows you sort of how many folks are actually involved in the transformation network. We have over 100 people involved in the TN right now, and that includes about 60 students. So 25 master's students, 13 PhD students, and 22 undergraduates, and about 52 faculty and staff at the moment. So it's a big team. It's a lot. We could not be doing this work without our community partners. Like the YAC team, we're doing what we call a convergent research design, where we are co-designing our research questions and our methodologies to determine how we're doing this work as much as possible. And so this is sort of a nice chart that sort of delineates for you the types of folks that we're working with throughout the TN and who we're working with. But it's a wide variety of types of non-academic partners that we're engaged in and that we are working with as a part of our community commitment. Part of our research design has us working across 3 different interconnected sort of research themes that really intersect and overlap. So I just want to sort of briefly connect with them. And I know none of you are in the TN, but I'm going to ask you to sort of maybe relate to them a little bit and tell me kind of where you feel like maybe your own research maybe connects as much as possible. So the first one relates to research that involves what we call headwater dependent communities. So of course, here in the Intermountain West, most of us are sort of dependent upon water supply that comes from mountain systems and snowpack. So we're looking at questions related to water security, ecosystem services that kind of connect to those headwater systems. The next sort of clump of research area that we have are what we call food, energy, water systems, and the network of questions related to regenerative agriculture and food, energy, water sovereignty questions, particularly related to Native American communities and issues in the Navajo Nation area. And then we also have a lot of, both of these types of questions have related to them issues related to governance and participatory issues, collective action issues, and ways in which you might have adaptation strategies that are facilitating or constraining, depending on how well they're working, these other questions. So how many of you have research related to headwater, forestry issues, or water scarcity types of issues? So raise your hand if you've got issues related to forestry, headwater dependent communities. Some? Do we have anyone here working on regenerative agriculture or food sovereignty? Anything kind of related to that? A few? And how about governance, participatory approaches, collective action types of issues? Oh, yes. I see the hub school here. This next slide is to tell you a little bit about our research design. A little bit more about our research design, I would say. So that was the substantive ways in which we work. This is a little more about the process ways in which we work. So we have 3 different types of ways in which we sort of tend to organize our research. We have project charters, place-based collaboratives, and collaborative working groups. These project charters, and they're all interdisciplinary in their designs, meaning they all have folks from different types of disciplinary perspectives working together. And then these project charters are maybe your classic interdisciplinary groups of maybe 3 to 10 people, depending on the size, that are working on a specific project related to a particular area of engagement. I'll provide an example of that in the example I'm going to be running us through here in a moment. These place-based collaboratives, we have 4 of them currently sort of in the network, sort of converge around specific areas in the transformation network where we've decided we want to be centering the specific and clustering project charters around areas that we think are of particular significance for the transformation network. And then the collaborative working groups are areas where we've decided there are opportunities for themes that provide opportunities for shared learning and engagement, where we want to make sure that we have workshops or, maybe opportunities for shared manuscripts or other types of tangible outcomes where we want to be highlighting specific types of opportunities. And we have 4 of those currently in the network. So there, of the place-based collaboratives, we currently have the Columbia Basin Watershed. We have one in the Front Range. We have one we call the Four Corners, Three Rivers group, which is really emphasizing work in the Navajo Nation. And then we have the Rio Grande Fireshed, which we'll talk a little bit in a moment about why we have kind of renamed it the Fireshed instead of the Watershed. And so that is the main focus, and you can see here how it's distributed. And if notice that we kind of don't have anyone in Wyoming right now. Maybe if we end up doing TN 2.0, we'll come knocking on your door. We need some help in Idaho and Wyoming. So this is kind of what this research design looks like from an organizational chart level. At the project charter level, we currently have 24 active project charters happening at that scale. And then within here are the place-based collaboratives, and here are the convergent working groups. So we've got convergent working groups in water futures, food sovereignty, wildfire and watersheds. They just had a really great workshop that went on post-fire restoration and recovery. And then something we call the synthesis group that works across the whole Intermountain West scale on shared data that can be synthesized. And then I already talked about these place-based groups a little bit, but then there might be like 3 charters that can all converge here. And then you can see how it tends to, they kind of cluster up in here. So they're like 4 charters that all relate to wildfire restoration, wildfire restoration and wildfire and watersheds and that kind of thing. And then here I am as the TN lead PI. We have 2 full-time FTEs here, a 0.25 FTE that just works on indigenous community engagement and coordination, and then a communications intern. We have an external evaluator and an advisory board. And then these are leadership team roles related to diversity, inclusion, and equity and inclusion and justice, tribal engagement, convergent research design, data management, and then community engagement more broadly. For us, tribal engagement has been such a critical part of the transformation network that we bifurcate it from community engagement more generally. It's been a real critical part of our team engagement. So you'll see these squiggly lines here, and they're meant to emphasize the fact that convergent research design, which means that we try and do our research that is, convergent research is a concept from NSF, the National Science Foundation, which means that you're doing work that's deeply integrated across disciplines and that's responding to a societal need. So we try and make sure that all of our work is doing that. And then we're also trying to use guided transformation in all of our work. And as I was trying to put together this talk, I decided I could only talk about one of those 2 things. And I decided to talk about guided transformation. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about our convergent research design and our approach to convergent research in questions. If you guys have questions about that, I actually brought some slides, I think, on that if you want. So let me know, but we're going to move into guided transformation. And The example I'm going to walk you through is a part of a project charter that I'm leading with Kelly Jones at New Mexico State University called Innovations in Governance. It's also part of the Wildfire and Watershed Collaborative Working Group, and it's also a part of the Rio Grande Fireshed Place-Based Working Group. So you can see how they all tend to nest and network together as a part of our research design. Everybody with me so far? We dive in. All right, so let's talk about transformation of Mayan watershed. This is a photograph of the Herman's Peak Cap Canyon fire of 2022. The largest fire in New Mexico's history to date. I feel like I tend to say that every year about a different fire. 341,000 acres. They're still adjudicating the FEMA claims. Federal government's pouring about $8 billion into New Mexico for this fire. $2 billion just to adjudicate the claims alone. We're going to be putting together a symposium as part of the Natural Resources Journal. One of the questions we're going to be asking FEMA is, what are you doing with that $2 billion? And how are you spending the other $6 billion? Like, how are those claims being spent? It's a very complicated design payout system. But the fire itself was devastating for the communities, both socially and ecologically. And this is the new reality, right, in the American West and really in the world. We know as a result of studies. There was a recent study in Nature and Ecology titled "Increasing Frequency and Fire Intensity" that highlights that globally the frequency and intensity of wildfires globally has more than doubled since 2003. So this is happening for various reasons and will continue to happen. So I like to say that wildfire is the ultimate regime changer. But there are a number of factors that are driving that transformation in the American West. We're going to get into it. We're going to think about whether this theoretical model helps us help communities think about these transformations and help make choices about how to build resilience in relationship to these changes. So we're going to unpack this squiggly model here. This theoretical framework that we're calling guided transformation. So have you guys been working with systems thinking in any of your classes yet? Any of you? A little bit? So this is kind of building from systems thinking, socio-ecological systems, and the concepts of resilience, for those of you who are familiar with it. We're also, as I'm going to be sharing with you, building in a couple of other theoretical frameworks here. But basically, the concept of guided transformation, we think about this as current system state. This idea of red is an undesirable system state. Your blue is your desired system state. And in guided transformation, basically, we're thinking about system trajectories as the movement between these system states and trying to aim to dismantle conditions that maintain undesirable system states and help to move into more desired system states, right? And identify places where we're locked in to existing conditions that we don't want to be in and help to build innovations that can move us into more desired system states. So this concept of innovation, this concept of lock-in, and I'm going to be introducing another concept in this next slide called window of opportunity. So moving this ball here, trying to avoid moving this ball here, this is what we're all about, right? So think of this as like Herman's Peak Canyon fire. What if we had done some work in that forest system so that we maybe were able to move to something more like this after that fire? This is the same basic concept, just using 3 dimensions instead of a 2-dimensional system. So this is the same cup and ball concept from systems thinking. But it can be a little more helpful to think of watching the balls move in the 3-dimensional system. So you can think about the historic system or the current status quo is like you're stuck in here. We can think about a regime change, moving into a fire, like maybe flipping you, maybe into an undesired system state this way, a regime change. A window of opportunity might be something that moves you out of an undesired system state, maybe into something, maybe flipping you out of an undesired system state. And then the innovation can be thought of as maybe shallowing the basin, so you can help move you out and into something, into this more desired system state, moving you into where you want to go. Okay, so these are some concepts that we want to start playing with. Is everybody with me so far? Okay, so let's start moving these. I'm going to keep these. They're going to be in the lower left-hand corner. Whoops, I'll get one more slide. As we're going to start moving through an example. But this is, I just want to share with you the theory kind of behind this. So the basic, this is mostly resilience thinking with a little bit of a twist. So most of this is just good old-fashioned resilience thinking, sociological systems, and Walker and Salt, etc. But we're also pulling in a little bit from something called SETS theory, socio-ecological technological systems theory, especially this idea called lock-in. So lock-in is when you kind of get stuck in certain pathways or technologies, different infrastructures, could be policies that keep your system in ways and states of being that you don't want to be in. The example, or maybe it's not just maybe ways you do want to be in, but just different. The example I like to give oftentimes is that roads lock us into cars. You know, right? So it's just this, think of roads as a subsidy for our way of being, for our transportation system. You know, so what kinds of things do you have in your life right now? Your coffee maker locks you into caffeine. Okay? So think of all the things you have in your household, in your ways of being, in your current lifestyle that currently lock you in to a certain way, right? So we have policies, we have our dams lock us into a certain way of storing water right now. So this is very helpful. And then the sustainable transitions research has some different concepts that we could be using. We're not going to use them all today, but basically the whole concept, all the concepts of innovations and windows of opportunity really come from this literature. And really thinking about driving us towards new pathways and new conditions, thinking about processes from transitioning to new systems is coming from this literature. So now moving into our example of my own watershed. It's a pretty picture. We just had our balloon fiesta. This is just downstream from where I live, along the Rio Grande in Albuquerque. So the Rio Grande supplies about half of the water for the state's population. Calling this the Rio Grande Fireshed, this is the project area I'm talking about. One of the reasons why I call it the Fireshed is that we're not really talking about the Rio Grande for a few different reasons. One is a whole lot of what we're talking about is not actually water from the Rio Grande. It's actually water from the Colorado system. Because a lot of our water is actually coming from a transbasin diversion of water from the San Juan Trauma Project as a result of water due to us under the Colorado River Compact. And a bunch of that water is actually coming down from, and of course this is actually also very much under threat as a result of climate change, forest system transition, wildfire, all that. So this water is coming down, and it's coming down through the Rio Grande. So the integrity of this watershed is very important. About a lot of that water that the Albuquerque, Santa Fe irrigators are all relying upon, Pueblo communities are all relying upon. Look how interjurisdictional this is. All this purple are tribal communities. And they're not just one tribal community, they're different Pueblo communities. Hickory Apache Nation is up here, but most of these are Pueblo communities. You got National Park Service in here, you got Forest Service in here, you got a lot of private landowners in here. So it's a highly interjurisdictional space. And of course, the water users are not the same as the landowners either. I'm not who's taken water law yet, but that's one thing you learn about the American West. It's people on the surface are the same people who own the water, right? So creating, you know, the incentives for the people, the surface owners, to protect the integrity of the upstream, to protect the downstream water uses is also really important. So, so a lot of the investments that we're going to be talking about to protect the integrity of this watershed are necessary up here. And so this is the kind of ownership and project area that I want to talk about. And this is an area, as I was mentioning at the very beginning of my talk, that's absolutely under an ecological transition as a result of three interrelated factors. Temperature alone is driving this across an ecological threshold as a result of tree die-off, as a result of temperature increases. So Park Williams has done a lot of research on this, just literally sucking the moisture out of the trees as a result of increased temperature is causing huge forest die-off. But then drought is also contributing to stress on trees, killing trees, and then pine beetles are contributing to the stress on the trees, right? Killing the trees. And then all of that is making them vulnerable to catastrophic wildfire. So as a result, all these trees are dying and stressed and vulnerable to wildfire. And of course, we have a loading of those trees that is unprecedented as a result of years of fire suppression. And folks think about fire suppression, when they think about the fire suppression that's occurred, they think about Smokey the Bear, right? So we think about the fire suppression that occurred. And that's true. But there was an earlier role of fire suppression from early colonialism in the 1900s as a result of grazing practices that occurred. There was almost a denuding of the landscape as a result of early grazing practices. So there was just a huge loading. So I need to go back just for a second. So this is we're starting to use our model here, talking about the current historic conditions, right? Trying to talk about the lock-in. We locked in a fuel load as a result of our policies and our practices. So we locked in biomass. So we locked in mega fires. We locked in the reality of mega fire into the system. And then we got one in 2011 as a result of what we call the Las Conchas fire. And the Las Conchas fire was itself the largest fire in New Mexico history at the time. And it burned around 150,000 acres as a result of the down power line. Did a ton of damage as a result of soils, etc. Here's a photograph of the devastation, post Las Conchas, definitely a mega fire. See if I've got the ability to show. There you go. This is absolute. literally plugged the Rio Grande just after a typical monsoonal rain. So this type of post-fire debris flow, while devastating, it shut down the drinking water supply for the city of Albuquerque for 3 weeks. This is what Cochiti, the dam behind the Cochiti Dam looked like with Las Conchas fire. You see that window of opportunity here, because while devastating, it was a wake-up call for the landowners and the water rights holders of the Rio Grande watershed. And they ended up creating something called the Rio Grande Water Fund, which is a voluntary collaborative that is a coordinated effort to protect the storage, delivery, and quality of the Rio Grande water through landscape scale forest restoration treatments, and including the tributary forest watersheds. And that includes the Rio Chama project water that I was just talking to you about. So it's an example of an emerging adaptation strategy that is popping up really all over the Mountain West, that's working with, but also beyond existing legal regulatory structures and beyond existing jurisdictional structures and administrative barriers. And it has a goal of treating over 600,000 acres over the next 15 years. And it's got over 100 project partners. And it's really working to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire. So it's got landowners, municipalities, irrigators, federal and state agencies, tribal partners, NGOs, etc. It's coordinated by the Nature Conservancy, but it's its own NGO. And it really serves as almost like a matchmaker between funders and project needs. So they created this map of wildfire risk to help prioritize the areas where the work or the money kind of do the most good. It's also created things like groups like what's called the All Hands All Land program, which is almost like a pre-fire hotshot crew to actually do this work across jurisdictions. Because one of the things they need is just like the capacity and experts to do this type of work. So this kind of work is this is a figure from another paper. That citation that you just saw, we actually published a paper on the Rio Grande Water Fund. For those of you who are interested in learning more about it, I don't really have time to kind of get into the details here, but I will say that this is a figure from a paper that's currently under review, talking about these collaboratives more generally, because there are over 100 of these types of collaboratives happening all across the Intermountain West. I like to say that they're popping up like morels across the post-fire landscape. And so we're trying to create a typology of them to understand, what they are, how they can be, what's making them effective, how can they be more effective, and sort of characterize them so that we can understand how we're adapting and how we can adapt better. But it's really a huge challenge. This graph also tries to depict their relationship to acres burned in a given year. I don't actually see any relationship. If anyone does see a relationship, let me know. It's just kind of a cool graph. So anyway, this is where I kind of invite you to think about how these scale transformations might fit within your own research. Obviously, I kind of walked you through showing you how the Las Conchas fire, while tragic, did create an innovation in the Rio Grande Water Fund. It is doing work. Is it going to work at the pace and scale necessary? Yet to be seen. I think in the case of the Hermes Peak Canyon fire, in and of itself, that for that particular community, the community of Mora, the answer was no. But I think, but I think I'm going to pull back on that. I haven't made that argument yet. It could have been worse in Mora. There was some firework that did mitigate larger impacts to that community. So I need to pull back on that comment and really think about whether because there have been some mitigating work that I think did reduce the damages that were caused to that community. It would be interesting to think about about that more carefully. Because we are working as fast as we can, but how fast can you really work? You know, I mean, it's a fight against time. But bringing this back to your research, I think these are the types of questions we're encouraging people to ask themselves, which is, you know, what is your current condition? What are the types of policies, technologies, or, you know, things that are dominant or difficult to change that are locking you in to your current regime? You know, what are the things that are locking you in? And then what are the windows of opportunity that maybe your system has faced or could face? And then what innovations might facilitate new trajectories for transformations to different system states? We're conceiving of this as something that we can be working with as a theoretical framework with community partners and engaging with community partners as a part of modeling efforts. That's a part of what we're thinking about as a next step with our framework. So this is something we're outlining in our paper. For those of you who are interested, I see some people like, you know, taking pictures or whatever. This is going to be published, so we're happy to provide you with this information. Let's see here. I think that's time, wrapping up with time for some conversation. So my last slide here beside my reference slide is just to encourage you to stay connected with the work that we're doing. So this is looking like an Instagram crowd to me, at least here, but maybe I might have some Facebook folks on Zoom, I don't know. But please connect with us and follow us. And we'd love to hear about your successes and your research as well. So let us know what you're up to. And we'd like to put you, we also have a listserv for our community partners, so we'd love to connect with you that way. And thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you. And I'm gonna go back to this slide. So we can maybe have a conversation.
Awesome. Anyone in the room, or if you're online and want to turn on your mic and ask a question, you can, or you can drop it into the chat.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was interested to kind of hear about the flood example and how it was sort of a catalyst for changing the systems. And I know it would probably be great to recognize those opportunities to kind of work through those windows of opportunity before like devastation happens, if possible.
Right.
And so I'm curious to know what like opportunities or factors that may influence how people recognize those windows of opportunities that don't involve, you know, like a catastrophic wildfire or some other event.
That is such a great question. This came up at CSU too, because, you know, a lot of times we look at these windows of opportunity as being kind of wildfires. Another example that we gave in the paper was a drought. So the Yakima Basin Integrated Water Plan came as a result of like 3 really bad years of drought, for example. But, you know, window of opportunity doesn't have to come as a result of a disaster, right? It can come as a result of something positive that opens, right? So can we all think about some positive windows of opportunity that arise? Let's see.
Different policies coming up.
Yeah.
And like voting in different policies.
Yeah, so legislation might create a window of opportunity. I would say the infrastructure bill and also the Inflation Reduction Act both provided lots of seed funding and lots of investments for communities throughout the West that have provided great window of opportunity for communities. So those, I think, may provide some examples. Legislation can provide money, so water smart grants provide some great windows of opportunity. Can you, I mean, are there? So
I think leadership, like having the right leaders or the right people willing to take action.
Yeah. Yeah, the right person at the right time can create a window of opportunity. Yeah. Yes.
Can I ask another question?
Of course.
Sorry.
No, you have to
We're
provide a
still on
window of
that one.
opportunity. That's where you, no, kidding.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know that you didn't talk a lot about your methodologies and sort of the process. I work with Corey on WIACT, and
Oh, great.
yeah, and I'm just curious. when thinking about the timeline of such research activities versus the timeline of communities and community goals, and particularly thinking across tribes and different
Yeah.
knowledge systems and those sorts of things, how has that worked out from the end of your study, and how do you think about possibly pre-planning or doing things that potentially analyze those things, or just get the team in place before the grant starts, or have literally an initial year that's okay, we're gonna pull the team together and start to ask. I mean, when you said our research questions were co-developed, can you tell us more? Because
Absolutely, yeah. So this is, another way of hearing this is this is you also asking that I gave the other talk instead of the kind of transformation. So you guys are gonna have to have me back for that one. I will say, Corey and I were meeting and we were talking about how we really need to have a gathering where we just have a gathering of those of us who are doing work in these really large interdisciplinary teams and learning from each other about what's working and what's not working. What I will say is that I'll take two things about this. One is that we have another paper in a special issue that is about our convergent research design. And one of our clear messages in that paper to the National Science Foundation is, if you really want to do convergent research, which involves when it's responding to a societal, one of our arguments is, you don't have, if you really parse out the NANSS definition of convergent research, you don't have to be responding to a societal need. But when you are, if you are, we argue you have to be involved in community partners. That's a part of doing convergent research in responding to a societal need. And then the next step for us is, when you're responding to a societal, when you're working with community partners, especially when you work with indigenous communities, a 5-year grant is just not adequate. That is not doable. So we need new paradigms, we need new pathways, we need NSF to recognize that reality and start thinking about things like drawing from their lessons with long-term ecological research stations and other types of funding paradigms for that type of work. In our network, the places where we have the most successful, truly convergent partnership work happening is where we already had pre-existing relationships. And so, for example, our work on the Navajo Nation is led by Carletta Chief, who is herself Dene. And she has had pre-existing funding from other NSF projects and other projects doing the type of work I'm referencing since 2017. And of course, it also has relationships in that, not necessarily those particular chapters, but in the communities more generally. And so that capacity to do the work, and that I have another person at New Mexico State University in Farmington who works with Navajo farmers, who's been working in that community for decades, doing work with that community. So it's that you build those relationships over time, then when new funding comes along, you're building from the existing relationship. So you know what I mean? Your momentum is already in place, you're working for those relationships. If you're working cold from the very beginning of a grant, even if you're working from like a planning grant or something like that, it's just not. So I think you have to be realistic about, even with any place-based community, or even a federal agency, I think just a 5-year window is a very difficult window sometimes to be working within. So I think that what I like to say is there are many different types of partners and many different types of pathways. We have to be realistic sometimes about the types of levels of. We have one of our diagrams we have for one of our papers is that we've got kind of a continuum of community engagement that we kind of work with our paradigm. I think being authentic, transparent, and not overstating what you're actually doing is really important. But I think that it's a work in progress. But I think sending clear messages to our funders about what's needed is a piece of that. Am I rambling at this point?
No,
You're
I
weaving.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Is there a question?
We have time for maybe one more. We're right at time right now, but.
Thank you all so much. Oh, go, Judy, do you have one?
Yeah, I guess when you started off kind of talking about like trying to guide to a desired state.
Yeah.
I guess there's sort of this question of like, do we know what that desired
Yeah,
state
good
is?
question.
And then also like who gets to sort of
Who
decide?
guides?
So,
Who guides?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, who guides and who decides like what that state
Yeah.
is, yeah.
I forgot to mention, that. I think in resilience thinking that I subscribe to, the Kool-Aid that I drink, I think the walk and salt Kool-Aid, I think, community partners the community gets to decide the identity of the system and the conceptual model of what that system state is, and also get to decide what the desirable system state is. So I think the community, but then who gets to be in that room? Right? Who gets to be a part of that conversation? I think that's where a lot of resilience models tend to, a lot of resilience theory gets critiqued by being very normative about like, oh, the community gets to decide. Like that's an easy answer. That's not an easy answer. That's a charged political question. So we need to be just acknowledge the fact that that's not. When I throw that out there, I'm making that sound easy, and that's not easy. So, that needs to be very thoughtful and engaged, and acknowledge that the actors that think, that resilience is often thought of as resilience of what and to what. So resilience like of a community to climate change, but then there's another question of for whom? Resilience for whom? And the critics of resilience have said that question for whom needs to be asked more often. And I couldn't agree with them more. So resilience for whom needs to be asked. And then there's another one. I taught a seminar kind of like this years ago, and I had 8 people in it, and 5 of them identified as Indigenous. And they brought to me a book called Research is Ceremony. We read it together, and they ended up bringing to me this idea that another question should be how. That the how of how you do the work is also equally important. So now when I talk about this, I say resilience of what, to what, for whom, and how. Right? We still haven't published that how. But how you do the work is also really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you get it? Thank God someone did. We're staying here.
Yeah. Desired state transition innovations to shift.
Staying here.
Yeah.
Good, because you get a place to stay in. A place to lean. I'm a leaner. Like a good fashion. You know,
Yeah, we're reading it, sort of like, maybe that could be like, like how to place these, like, that's a couple of investments.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
and then I think,
Like,
so if I'm wrong,
sort of.
yeah. Nothing is worse than presenting in front of people you know. I've given a speech. Really? I've given a speech in front of 14,000 people at the National FFA. And I still don't get as nervous as when I'm in front of like Maggie or Corey, and I'm getting graded.
Program she went
I can't wait for you. Good. You ready?
Sweet.
Oh, see that? I'm just thinking.
Love mine.
I'm thinking like maybe.
Or fours of two. Ripping. Have you made it yet?
We're gonna decide what you're challenging. I'm trying to. Trying to share.
That's key. That's
Either I read off a piece of paper.
Is everyone want to go?
If I have the paper, now I'm gonna start animating.
Mommy, that just makes my day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in here, yeah.
That's such a great question.
It is the question.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be awesome. Oh, I can't wait. It's Y, right?
Yeah, not rock.
I only say rock. It's rock. The P. Instead of like Y. Google, autocorrect made it all E and I'm like, I gotta go back to it.
As soon as I. Like 100%.
Yeah, we just stayed up really late last night, so it was fine. But, you know,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is your place.
Wednesday or Friday night. That's kind of amazing. No, like that. And now I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's three regenerated. Oh,
Yeah. We're trying out, to have them all out. That was a boost.
Hi, I'm Sam Johnson. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. And like, one, well, goes to the Rocky, the rock springs, or the main side of the back is blue, and then the peak side.
The weather stays.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have Yeah, I mean,
Alex, did you bring snacks? It'll be good. Yeah. It's a snack break, it's casual.
We go to 7:30, no snacks.
So.
Actually, until midnight.
Oh, I have like 3 people that signed up.
No, yeah, it's tricky. There's.
Was the last person?
Rochelle.
Did you bring? Right here.